concrete walls. There's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone. Between city lights, we don't have to hide. I wanna go, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? I can't understand why we can't hold hands, but they don't know what we have is real love. Aren't you sick and tired of having to hide? I know a place, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow?
What is up, you guys? It is Sunday afternoon, and we got a little something different for you today. No, it is not time for Q&A, because I am not alone today on my live stream. Let me ask you a question. What would your reaction be if let's just say a major celebrity said they'd come up with a new form of math, a new form of physics, geometry that would change the way that people saw the world? What would you do if that same person said that they wanted to put up $25,000 to help develop a new kind of multi-rotor? Well, I'll tell you what I would do. I would say, please come on my live stream and tell me more about that. And that is what we are going to do today. Today, I have a special guest. It's special to me, although he portrays himself as just another guy. That's true, too. But we have a special guest, Terrence Howard. The actor is how most of you probably know him. But I'm going to let him introduce himself, how he prefers to be introduced today, in just a second. And the reason we're here today is because he is putting up $25,000 of his own money to help develop a new kind of drone to his specifications. So I guess without further ado, let me hand it over to Mr. Terrence Howard. How are you doing, Terry?
I'm really good. Thank you so much, Joshua, for having me on your show. And for my friends, I see Drew just came in.
Oh, Drew's here. What's up, Drew? Yeah, we have a bunch of people here. Terry, you're here, and we also have your friend Chris Seeley. Who, Chris? You said you are an industrial engineer. Is that right?
Industrial design and
industrial design. Thank you. The word engineer carries certain connotations that are, yes, industrial design. And you've been working with Terry on this project. We also have Mr. James Pellegrini, Scarecrow FPV, who, among other things, worked on the photography for the website. Probably has the best looking camera out of any of us right now. And is going to be talking to us later about who has already joined the competition. And there is Mr. Drew Camden. Drew, I mean, we just couldn't do it without you, man.
Yeah, that's
Right.
So let me by the way, I will be monitoring the chat, keeping an eye on the chat, taking questions, but maybe not like normally. My live stream is 100% questions, but so maybe not 100% today. And we are going to be focusing those questions on the Lynchpin project and the contest. I'm sure that there are many, many questions you guys would love to ask Terry if given the opportunity, but this is not the place for any question you might imagine. We're going to be focused on questions related to the contest. So,
Josh,
yes, sir.
One person needs to be introduced. David Johnson from Argos Vu, who has been working with me also from the inception of bringing this out to the world, and really was responsible for me becoming aware and starting to work with you guys at Rotor Riot and made these introductions. So he's going to be on the call as well.
Yeah,
I'm here. I'm in the dark, kind of a fan.
There we go.
But
I'm real. He's audio, and later we're going to get some screen sharing from him, but not no video. Yeah, thank you, DJ. I hear from the chat Terry's a little quiet. Let me turn your volume up there, Terry. I need a producer. Terry, the
1-2-1-2-1-2.
You're good, man. Terry, the question I want to open with is, I like to ask everybody this who gets into FPV, but especially people who maybe aren't known first and foremost for being an FPV. What was your first exposure to FPV that sort of made you go, oh my God, this is something I have to be a part of?
It was like I came across the scene a lot later than most people come across something. When I was a kid, my great-great-grandfather, he was in the service, and he would always speak about these unmanned vehicles that he would took a part in the 50s, but it was stuff that was, top secret. He couldn't even really speak about it. And so when I first saw UFOs, I always thought, oh, well, or the idea of UFOs, I always thought, oh, that's my great grandfather. We call him great daddy. He was talking about these things, then as an adult, when I was introduced to the FPV community, when I looked at the Lynchpin, and I was like, wait a minute, well, what would happen, if I put props in each one of these pentagonal spaces, and how it would behave. And then I began talking to DJ, and he turned me on to Rotor Riot, and I saw Drew's work and saw him go to the top of some tower and climb down some in between space, like 200 feet, it seemed like, that you couldn't even get to. And I remembered having dreams when I was younger of being able to fly and not having any limitations. And I said, wow, that would be great to see something like that with the Lynchpin. And DJ made the phone calls and sent out the emails and met with Chad and came down to Washington to meet a number of the different people that were really passionate about the FPV and what was taking place with the FAA. And, we kind of locked horns and figured out ways in which we could help each other. And therefore, now we have the competition that Chad and that Drew said would be great for their community, because these were the most innovative people within the world of flying, not just first person of view, but, there's engineers and different pilots from all different fields in the thing of flying. So, I'm a newbie to FPV, but the idea of wanting to fly, I think that's innate in every human being or any creature on the planet. Even a rock ultimately wants to be able to fly.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we've talked about in fighting remote ID. That FPV hobby is about more than just kids flying toys. It is about people pushing the boundaries of what is possible in terms of technology and physics. And it feels like that's something that you're trying to do with your concepts of the Lynchpin, and what then this contest is sort of intended to inspire people to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about as human beings, even though we consider ourselves to be separate and individual and have very distinct and original ideas or thoughts, but literally, when one person within the species comes up or sees something new, then everyone within the species, shares that idea, whether they're conscious of it or not. So when we push our boundaries ourselves, we're not just expanding our own immediate area that we're existing in. We actually expand it for all of humanity and for all the creatures involved in it. And so we have to use that imagination, and we have to use that instinct, because that's what got us to life in the first place. Is following the imagination of what could be possible, and the instinct and the drive to never let it go, no matter where it turned, which leads us to the common factor of everything. Because if you're going to be affected by all things, then you have to recognize where you are connected to all things. And so that led me to trying to find a divisible number by which everything in the universe would dance or operate with. And that number turned out to be, what happens when four bubbles meet, or four forces meet at a given point. That was the highest pressure condition. And it just turned out that it made the linchpin, but also began to answer a number of other questions.
Now the linchpin is that. Hold up that shape again. The linchpin is your name for that shape, which
Yeah.
is geometrically, it is a collapsed dodecahedron. So when people hear you talking about that, that's what you mean. And that shape has certain significance to you, and that is why you've created this contest to make a drone specifically in that shape. I do want to say to the people in the chat, there are people in the chat asking some questions about the technical nature of the contest and so forth. We are going to get to that, but I just want to sort of feel out a little more, Terry, where you're coming from and what your motivation is. What is it that you said? You said when people see something happen, then it sort of expands their mind and their philosophy. What is it that you are hoping people will realize, or come into their consciousness through this contest and through the linchpin drone and so forth?
Well, the competition is more from a very selfish place, a narcissistic place. I know that I have a gift towards certain things, like my attention to geometry. That's my gift, to look at things beyond the obvious and discern a possible outcome from it. My gift wasn't in engineering. My gift wasn't in designing flight controllers. But I do know that since I was not classically trained in geometry and all these things, and gained an understanding of something that seems to have an application to everything within our given universe, then the person that would be capable of building the flight controller wouldn't necessarily have 95 degrees behind his name. It's nice if they do have that, but I figured it would come more so from the heart and from the spirit. And later on, if we get the time, I'll say how these pictures initially came into my mind. But I figured I would find within this community, somebody who would become a part of our team, and a number of individuals so we can continue to grow this into everything that it's possible. So it's really selfish, because I really want to find talent. The $25,000 is there as an attractor, say, come on, but here's basically an interview and audition,
Yeah.
the future.
Drew, let me flip to you here and ask you, when you first heard about this contest, what effect do you think it can have on the larger FPV community?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a reason to be involved in this. I mean, I've seen people who are inspired by Terry's philosophy and his vision, and the minute they hear about it, they're like, "I want all in on this."
Yeah.
And there are other people who don't have that reaction, and who are more interested in the technical challenge. I'm speaking just for myself. I can say that I think that there's potential to grow FPV, to expand sort of what people see as the hobby is capable of. And I'm curious, what you see as the potential.
So, I guess what I would say is, my enjoyment of FPV is pretty focused around high performance sport flying, but that's not all FPV is. When I first got into drones, I didn't really set out to be a great pilot. I was I was doing all sorts of tinkering things. I was into 3D printing. I was, dabbling, wanting to get into CNC. I just wanted to make stuff, and drones like had this intersection. So I used to be more into the hobby from kind of the maker side of things. And I used to want to play with like autonomous flight, and I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool to make a fleet of drones that would just like orbit my house and be solar powered, like all this crazy stuff. I never really did much any of that because at some point I got bitten by the piloting bug, and that's where my focus went. But that's not everyone's case. I think what's so cool about this hobby is there are so many different ways to enjoy it, and it brings different minded people together. So you can have someone like me that's, I just want to fly. I just want to make my power loops as good as possible. Or you can have someone that just wants to build. I want to try different things. I want to make the arms skinnier, just the hell of it. Oh, they break. Now I want to change it. Right. And I think that the FPV community, as a subsect of the greater drone community, are some of the most innovative and the fastest iterating people. They move fast. I mean, like the product life cycle in FPV, it's like 3 months is a year. Everything happens so fast, and this is a pretty out there idea. And I thought if there was any group that could iterate on this, that could make headway on this in a fast way, it would be the FPV community, and that would be a cool opportunity to bring to them. And that for someone, it could be like a really big deal, and I do think that not everyone's going to get it. And there could be thousands of people that see this and like, I just want a power loop. I don't get it. But if you can find that one person that gets bitten by the Lynchpin bug and wants to throw themselves into it, it could change their life and, give them an opportunity to work on their passion. I'm blessed to get to work in my passion. I get to work on what I love every day, and this could be that for someone else,
Let's speaking of working on your passion and getting bit by the bug, James, I'd like to switch to you here, because I originally I thought I need some photographs for the website, and James is a great photographer. I said, James, do you want to be involved in this? And you got involved in this on so much more than a professional level. And I wonder if you'd like to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so you just kind of pulled me in. You said, hey, there's this thing going on, and, we need some photography, would you like to be involved? And I kind of stopped saying no to things. And that's kind of been like my theme for the year. So even though I'm greatly overworked, I was like, I got to at least hear, what this is about. And you introduced me to the team, and I found out what the project was all about. And this just, this sort of marries just a number of things that have always been of great interest to me, from not just from tinkering and art, but also, the geometric, everything surrounding the geometry and how it interrelates with the world as we experience it. All of it is of great interest to me. So this is this is a dream project for me because it satisfies all of my fascinations all in one spot. And then to be surrounded by such a talented team of just free-minded, openly thinking individuals who are just wizards. I am a muggle amongst wizards here.
Oh, I'm not sure I would say that, but
the work that everyone does is just mind-blowing on a daily basis. So
all right, well let's get a little more down into the nitty-gritty of the Lynchpin drone and the contest, because some people in the chat are saying this is just so let's define it for people who may not have read the terms and so forth. The idea is to create a drone in the shape of the Lynchpin that can not just fly, but can also rotate or translate into any orientation. Terry used the term modulate. And there are some questions coming in about that. I think Chris, maybe it's time to turn to you and maybe do some screen sharing or discussion about the Lynchpin shape, and maybe talk some about the technical requirements of the contest and how that relates to the drone and how it might fly. Oh, Chris, are you muted?
Yes.
Now you're unmuted.
There we go.
So one of the questions that came in the chat was what are the angles of the Lynchpin? Someone said, I tried to recreate it in my 3D modeling software and I couldn't get it to come out right. Is there anything you can show us about that? Or maybe DJ, you would be the right person to ask.
Yeah, DJ probably for the angles in the distributed. Do you have that handy, DJ?
A little bit, just as far as like that. This is the kind of the as we dive into the sacred geometry aspect of this, and it's one that goes back to antiquity. The tetrahedral angle is crucial, and it's 109.47 ... to infinity ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any video of that, any visuals of that, DJ, and you can share the screen?
You want to go this direction, Josh? It's a bit of a rabbit hole, of course. You know.
Well, if we start going down a rabbit hole, I'll try to pull us back out. We're only planning to go for about an hour today, but yeah, I'd love to let people take a look at it and discuss it a little more technically. Let me answer this question while you bring that up. Hang on. There was a question from Mystery D. Mystery D, thank you for your straight honesty. If this is so photography oriented, why hasn't anybody brought up the fact that you need like 4 360-degree cameras? How do you fly it? Line of sight, FPV? Where the F do you put a camera?
Well, that's what we got to work out. That's what the next part of this competition will be. You know, where do you put the sensors? Where do you put the LiDAR? Because it has the potential of Ezekiel's wheel, and being able to go in any given direction. Well, we have the directions worked out. Now it's putting those 4 cameras there, and then it'll be stitching those cameras' perspectives together as to which one, when it's moving in one given direction, maybe that's the camera that takes off. But those are all the things that I need the FPV community for, and that I would like to find some talent so we can build the corporation and literally grow this. But go ahead, DJ, explain this since it's up there. That's great.
Yeah,
okay,
good question.
Yeah. So the interior of the Lynchpin is a tetrahedron, and the angle here is it's 109.47 ad infinitum, and kind of the key to the whole thing, the fitting together of these pentagons ends up causing a thing that you see in harmonic analysis that ends up being kind of like a bit of a WTF, you know, as far as Cartesian coordinates go. So there are angles that you can get really remarkably close, but you always run into this fifth relationship that occurs in music. Actually, the fifth being the second most harmonious interval after an octave. So like a piano is tuned, it's called well tempered, but you go off the natural intervallic ratios for pure rationality out of this. And this is ultimately what Terrence's book is pointing at in many ways. And what are the energetics that cause life to form ultimately? And you'll see this in things like sand dollars, etc. Look at the pentagonal aspect of many flowers, and our entire anatomy is built off the symmetries of 5, and where do those come from? And that's ultimately the pointing area. I know that's a bit esoteric, but
yeah,
you can get very very exact with this as far as like optimal engineering, prototyping of this geometry, but it's pointing at something that's a bit transcendent.
I don't know who the best person to answer this question is, but let me ask the question that's being asked in the chat. The question that's being asked is, what's the practical application of this? And there's another question that's coming up that ties in, which is, this seems like, from a pure flight perspective, a really inefficient design. Like there's always going to be some motors that aren't really doing anything. I would like to say though, before I throw that to you, that even if this was just a pure passion or art project, the fact that people out there are passionate about it and want to share it, I mean that, and the fact that Terry's putting up 25 grand if you want to get in on it, I mean, to me that means that it's at least worth looking at. But what are the practical applications of this? Who's the best person to answer that?
Well,
I was thinking,
Chris,
Terry?
best for that, and you know, we
Or
can
Chris?
answer it with words, but Chris, we can throw a simulation up there, a particle simulation, how it behaved in there, to see if this thing would be inefficient with flight, or whether it would make flight, you know, really open up the door for flight. So I'd love for Chris to handle that. And if
Okay. Chris, let me turn it over to you. What are the practical applications of this? And if possible, why does it need to be this shape as opposed to, you know, a more traditional shape?
and DJ, you might want to let Chris have the screen for this,
Sure. Okay.
because then you can throw that simulator up and it'll answer that in the best possible light.
let me just open up a file here. So let me see.
I just want to interject while we have a down second. I saw in the comments someone was saying that they wanted to get the frame but didn't have $45 to spend on the kit that's on the Rotor Riot store. So actually, I'm currently uploading it to Thingiverse so that you can download the connectors, print them yourself if you have a 3D printer or have a friend with a 3D printer, and then put it together. You don't have to. The kit that we have on the store has carbon fiber rods, which kind of accounts for why it's $45. But you can get like wooden dowels. They just need to be, what is it, 4 millimeters in diameter, and they can be any length, right? You can scale it. So we used 100 millimeters, but you can make it bigger if you want, as long as they're all the same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there was.
so I'm doing that.
There was never an expectation that he would have to buy it from the Rotor Riot store.
No,
you know, we
no,
just
it's
wanna
just
get
to make
out
it
there.
easier if you don't want to deal with printing and sourcing the sticks yourself.
There's also some questions going on in the chat about whether the amount of money being offered is proportional to the work. And I've talked to people, because I don't know the answer either. I'm not a flight controller designer. So when Terry said we're putting up 25 grand, so I was like, well, that seems like a lot of money to me. But then I talked to other people, and some of the people I talked to said this is going to be months of work. I wouldn't touch it for that amount.
Mhm.
Other people I talked to said, no, I could do that in an afternoon. Now, who's right? I will tell you, though, we have 10 people already who have entered the contest. One of them is Kevin Plaisir, the lead Emu Flight developer. He seems to think he knows how to crack it. So I don't know who's right. And at the end of the day, whether someone wins the contest and accepts the prize will ultimately determine it. But I don't think it's ludicrous. Some people are saying this would be 200 hours, 500 hours of work.
Yeah.
Some credible people seem to feel that may not be the case.
Well, at the end of, by those that that are called to this dance, they see the much larger picture. Because one of the benefits, pause your screen for a second, Chris, because I don't want them to miss that. We're not talking about just a single structure that's going to be out there flying. We're talking about, for the first time, when I said modulate, the ability for structures to bond. And because we found the fractal source, the cause structure, it's able to make an unlimited number of bonds and work as a much larger structure. So everything that you saw in Transformers of Big Hero 6 and all the things that looked like they were science fiction, no, now there are science possible as a result of the Lynchpin. So the people that I'm looking out for is going to ultimately be in charge of $100 billion company. It just with regard to the bonding capability. With 1 million drones, you can take over any nation in the world. So you think the military won't want to have a part in this? Well, the person that wins this competition, the people that place the best in this competition, or that applies themselves the most in this competition, those are the people that I'm going to ask, hey, will you help build this and run this part of it? Because there's a number of different things. So, if somebody feels like this is above and beyond them, I'll give you one example. When I did Hustle and Flow, I got paid $12,000. That's what they were paying me to sing, to dance, to do all of that acting. I got paid $12,000 for that, but it's opened me up to all these other opportunities. So that's what this basically is. It's your hustle and flow, if you have that drive. Chris, will you explain why the linchpin, how it behaves inside of, within space itself?
Sure, I can show this this design here. Thanks, Chad, for this model here too, the directions model. That's I believe you did that one. I believe. So if I look from the top here,
let me switch to your shared content. Hang on a second, Chris.
And if you'll notice, you'll see
go.
that this has opposing vortices on either direction. So for the competition, it would be best, I believe, if one uses, have, 12, literally 12 sets of props rolling, on opposites, but go ahead, explain.
Right. So this is the general shape, and the arrows show the rotation of the potential rotation for your props and which way they would spin. This is the linchpin, and when we select, what I've done here is put in the actual vortexes, and their force vectors or thrust vectors are pointing on the planes of on the linchpin. So there's 2 on each face of the pentagons facing out, and they focus at a point. If you look down the angle here, they'll focus at a tetrahedral point at infinity, where the 3 come together on all 4 sides. And then what we did, just as a simulation, and the purpose of this too is if you imagine the flying ball that Luke Skywalker trained with for the Jedi, that's kind of how this thing, we envision it flying, would be something like that, stationary in space, orientate around itself in any direction, and translate in any direction, and it would fly, really any way you want it. Really, that's the goal. And so then when we ran the simulation here, so you've got 12, in this case I have the 12 vortexes, and there's one force in the center that's pulling the air back into it to simulate how the air would go back in towards the center of the drone and come back out through each of the faces simultaneously.
Yeah,
and so it creates this harmonic feedback loop. And then these particles, this is a physics simulation here. So when I run this simulation, all these little blue balls represent like an air particle. And then when they go into the force fields, they will change color, and the colors will be: blue is for no motion and red is high velocity. So you'll see a velocity field vector, a vector field translate here. When I hit play, it will simulate for you. And you kind of see that it starts to harmonically oscillate at first. And then when it settles in, you start to see a hexagonal field around the outside of the craft, right? And slowly over time, you'll see the flowers start to form. So the air will actually start to form into the flower shape. So this is an animation, just to say again, it's not animation, it's a physics fluid simulation.
Yeah, I think people are having a little trouble seeing the animation because the Zoom call is having a little trouble keeping up with all of that stuff. But
okay, so what I'll do is I'll pause it here in the spot and let it refresh, and then I'll stop the simulation so you can just kind of see the field, and then I'll rotate around it slowly. So this is how the air, in theory, should flow something similar to this around that type of a shape and create this standing wave. So what we're looking to do is basically cancel all the forces in all directions. So all the forces end up pointing directly at the center of gravity within the craft, and it'll just sit in space, pretty much decoupled, right?
And
Within
for
the
anybody,
air, of course.
And for anybody that wants to see the simulation, all they have to do is go to the competition rules. If you go into an area that's where it says hindsight, you hit hindsight, and then you'll see it should show up, and it should say directions. Well, if you look in directions, right inside of the directions, I was talking about the directions of the blades. You look at that and you'll be able to pull up this simulation and see it in real time for yourself. So go ahead, Chris.
Terry, there's some questions coming in about the rules of the contest. So I wonder if it would be a good time to start talking about the rules of the contest and your intention behind the rules. In the beginning, the contest was $15,000, and there was a clause in that, like the lawyers put in, that related to the intellectual property. That then you were like, oh, that wasn't my intent. Can you speak to your intent for basically the relationship between you and the ultimate winner or winners of the contest?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, well, first I have to preface by saying I'm not a lawyer, so I still will retain whatever rights that was set out in the contract.
Of course.
I speak if I speak improperly, but what we set up initially, my attorney thought that I needed to be protected and own all of this stuff, and it was like, dude, I just had my face stolen by Fox. I know what it's like to have somebody's intellectual property taken by somebody. I was like, and not receive any dividends for it. So I said, these people, I would, for the sake of the Lynchpin, I would like to own. And if you win the competition and you accept the $25,000, then you are selling your intellectual property, to the company, but you will still receive all the royalties that you would have not normally received in standard operating procedure. And anybody that knows me, I always go above that anyway. And as you've heard in this conversation, what I want is to build a team of super scientists, of super innovative individuals that can really help me in populating the world with what is the common factor. Like even in putting this up here for everybody to know ahead of time. All the naysayers that say, oh, well, this won't fly or it'll be inefficient. No, this will fly better than anything that's ever flown before, because nothing in the history, of mankind's technological advances ever is able to cancel out all effects of nature or all these impending forces. But the Lynchpin clearly does it without any animation.
That brings up another question that has to come up, and you talked about building a team of super scientists to help solve this problem. One of the things that you're trying to do is to challenge established, well, I mean, really basic stuff, not just philosophy, psychology, geometry, math, even. And yet the team that you're going to build, these people are coming from traditional math and so forth, and they're bringing that. Everything that this is being built on, multi-rotors, etc., are all built on that 1 × 1 = 1 basis. How can you build a solution that's going to sort of expose the world to 1 × 1 = 2, built on a 1 × 1 = 1 basis?
Well, the funny thing is, even though humanity multiplies everything as 1 × 1 = 1, I ask everybody out there in the universe or on this call to show me one example in nature where an action times an action doesn't have a reaction. And I bet it would beg to differ with what you've said, that everything is built off of it. No, our misinterpretation of how the universe works is built upon everything, nothing having consequences with anything else, because that's what happens when 1 × 1 = 1. The action and reaction laws are completely abandoned. Conservation energy laws are abandoned. So even with that handicap, we have learned to be able to fly. We've learned to be able to try and gain some understanding how the universe works. But what we have discovered, and with the geometry has proven, beyond an equation, with each one of the geometries that have been patented here, all of these things are geometric proofs, visual proofs of how the universe really behaves. So the 1 × 1 = 2 is, to the uninitiated, could be seen as a metaphor for challenging the status quo. But to those who have the calling, the 1 × 1 = 2 shows equanimity and the universe, and it opens the door for really being able to understand how all things come together, and ultimately how all things affect everything that comes together. So you don't need to understand that now. But what you do understand is that the same way they had to challenge the idea of the world being flat, and everyone considered that to be ludicrous, when they challenged it, 1,400 years later, Christopher Columbus, climbs on a boat and proves it for everyone, according to mainstream.
If I could chime in, you know,
Yeah, true.
I come from a traditional mathematics background. I have a degree in engineering physics. And, you know, I guess what I would say is I've never told Terry, hey, I buy in and understand everything you're saying. Traditional math works very well for me. It helps me 3D print, helps me fly drones, help me engineer cars at General Motors. It's a tool, but there's always more than what we know. And I guess the best way to think of it is Newtonian physics is an awesome tool. And when I was in high school learning Newtonian physics, it all worked. And I could calculate that when we dropped the ball off the roof of our school, we could calculate how long it's going to take to hit the ground. And the calculation was right. And it was incredible. And Newtonian physics is all made up. It's a tool that works at low speeds, close to large masses like the Earth. But in actuality, there's so much more going on. And when Einstein came around and had general relativity, and he was a patent clerk at the time, not a degreed scientist, it didn't make any sense. No one believed it. And it took until they had to wait for an eclipse so that they could actually measure that light bent around the sun, because the sun was the only the only high mass object close enough that they could measure the light bending around the sun, but the sun itself would blow out their measurement instruments, so it had to wait for a solar eclipse. And then it was like, oh, okay, and they measured it. There's something to it, and everyone thought Einstein and general relativity was right. And then that was disproven, and then we had special.
It's always a major. You know, there's a lot of energy. It's like this wrestling match that happens in mass. You know, and all the dynamics. Although what's presented to us as something that's so clean and precise and everything, the dynamics that happen in the process of creating our reality, and particularly in the sciences, it's a drama inside a drama inside a drama.
You know what? Before you go, PJ, since you popped on, will you do me a favor? Will you go back and take over?
Sure.
Because you were showing the bonding linchpins while we have this conversation, and I love keep going.
Okay.
I know Drew was about to say something.
Okay, I think Chris, you need to stop sharing there.
And thanks, Chris.
There we go. Yeah, beautiful.
There you go. Yeah, and I agree. As DJ brings it up, I agree. Like the metaphor use is just a tool. Speaking of tools, is so you can, Andrew, so we can just think of. You know, it helps you think in hyperbolic terms. Like get us out of that. You know, classical.
That's the key word right now.
While you're bringing that up, DJ, I'll jump in and speak to some of the comments on the channel. I mean, obviously, I'm also working from a 1 × 1 = 1 background, but I don't think that I think that if your first reaction to something that you go, well, that's not right, and then you just throw it out, you just reject it entirely, that is, I think you may miss out on opportunities and potential. And I think there are a lot of opportunities and potential here, whether or not you feel inspired by the metaphor of 1 × 1 = 2 and the principle of equanimity and so forth. I think that there are some people who are going to approach it from a place of inspiration, and other people who are going to approach it as a technical challenge. But I think there's various perspectives from which you could be drawn to this. Let me switch over to DJ's screen here.
I like how it points to, you know, just some basic common sense ways of thinking. You know, that nature creates through division, not necessarily by multiplication, right? So.
Okay. Wow, that's beautiful, DJ.
Right. Yeah, about a blast from the past here, right? But zooming out, we're just zooming out from the solar system out to the it's called the local interstellar cloud.
Can I preface this, DJ?
Sure, go ahead.
We had about a year ago, DJ and I were sitting up, and it was just us two lonely people working about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And we were talking about I kept making the statement that it was a common factor of everything. It's where 5 and 6 and all these different numbers, find equanimity. And I was like, well, if it is a common factor of everything, we should be able to throw it up in this, it should predict where stars and all of those things, happen. And he was like, well, we can try it. And I was like, well, just put it up there. Well, DJ chose to take the Lynchpin and pull it into the solar apex, right, basically where the sun is. And I put it on a basic orientation. And then I didn't talk to him for a week because I was in Vegas, busy with my family, having fun and da-da-da. And he had been trying to show me this thing that he had, the results of it. So I'll let you guys see it at the same time.
Okay, so I'll go back to let's see, let me find my place here. I go back to the celestial alignment was one of the big ones that we ran across during our initial exploration of this of Terrence's geometry, and this was the original kind of find. And there's some remarkable things if you think of where your point of view, and then 2 points. 3 points make a plane. So this is the beginning conception of this thing. And I'll make it fast, but you'll kind of see this remarkable alignment that kind of got everything rolling. But I've got the Lynchpin aligned with it's the celestial plane, which is ultimately the plane of the Earth, the North Pole pointing directly north. So this orange line, the solid line, is called the celestial equator. And if I do the alignment, and if you think of your eye as one point, and then these two, they're the inert. Terrence refers to these as the noble gases. So at any of these vertices of these pentagons, so they line directly up with that plane, right? So, but then, like, I was just playing around with it because he was pointing in a direction, but it's like, well, what happens if we do X, Y, and Z here? And then I'm seeing that this one, if you take these 2 points and then your eye point, this is the galactic plane, right? And one of the physicists that I've been associated with in the past, Eugene Bagashoff, was finding this alignment from a different angle. And it's like, I wonder if how the Lynchpin rolls with this kind of idea, right? So here's an interesting alignment too, right? But it ended up being a trifecta, and it really surprised me. But if we look at let me get it here, yeah. So this one ends up lining up with the ecliptic as well. So this one here.
Yeah.
So this trifecta that kind of occurred, kind of opened up my window into, like, once again, like kind of it was a WTF moment, So
it's a happy accident,
yeah,
or it's
yeah.
something that that the universe has planned for us to be able to see. And me taking it to the FPV community, who wants to be able to fly. This is just me saying, hey, this is the lowest hanging fruit for us to venture into the unknown. Now we have proof that the world is not flat. Now we have proof that there's a little more for us to take into consideration, because this is real. This, and this is up a 3-dimensional image up against a 2-dimensional background. Can you imagine, a 4-dimensional image up against a 3-dimensional background, how much clearer that will become? But I say all of this for anybody that might be questioning, is it worth your time or not? Well, I guess you'll see. But all I need is one. All I need is one of you to try, and we'll see what happens.
Well, we're coming up on the end of the hour. I think we should wrap up with, well, we're not quite wrap up yet, but there are definitely some people in the chat who are not interested. I want to hear from James about some of the people who are interested, because we actually already have some people who are either inspired or feel that the prize is worth their time. James, how many people have entered the contest so far?
Let me see. So far, there are 12. We got a couple that that applied during the stream, so that's great. And
Okay.
and that's what, what we're looking for. I mean, anytime, you know that you're moving in the right direction, when you're swimming upstream, it's, and some people are going to say, oh, this isn't worth the money, or that's not a lot of money, or it's going to take a bazillion hours to do this. That's okay to think that way, but what you got to keep in mind, that we're looking for a longer term relationship. We want someone who hasn't lost that sense of wonder, who just wants to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. So that's just kind of in a sense, a down payment on wherever this thing takes us. And we know that this project will speak to the people that it needs to speak to. And it's okay if, I've seen a lot of the comments as well, rolling in as I've been sitting here, and that's okay. People don't have to think, and DJ puts it the best way possible. Terrence is pointing at something, and this is this is an ongoing, process of discovery, and it's nothing is has congealed to the point where we know exactly everything about all of this. We're just like, hey, you know what? We've hit our technical limits amongst the team, and we need to bring somebody in who's open-minded enough to make this happen, because we want to see what happens next. And, and thankfully, we've got, about a dozen people now, and all of them seem, talented and qualified, and they all have a lot of really interesting things to say. And it's great. We're off to a good start, and it's buy the ticket, take the ride. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a challenge to see if we can collectively solve a problem as a collective mind working towards one thing to solve one problem.
Yeah.
Right.
As
And it's just,
right?
the prize money is just the North Star. You know what I mean? What it's about is the journey and the folks that choose to take it. This is just something for them to work towards while they, work on their, area of discovery.
Like I said, I was brought there for one reason, and that's, that once you get involved with the Lynchpin, once you tap onto truth, that's you can't let it go, and it doesn't let you go. Everything you're looking at here is literally the flower of life, which they've built the entire pentagonal or the platonic solids from misinterpreting this flower of life and drawing straight lines where these spheres, these circles intersected. And the only approach that I did was just follow the natural geometry and put the pieces together according to universal ratios. And the universe, applauded and kept giving me more and more. So this is literally, if you want to know another alternative to what you've been taught, if you want to see what the universe perspective is on a given thing, come and take this walk with us, what you find will blow your mind and everyone else's mind that
There's a question in the chat about how you're going to control it with only a 4 degree of freedom controller, and one answer to that is
who says it's a 4 degree of controller.
The other thing is there are 6 degree of freedom controllers that exist. Another solution that I've heard people propose is that you use a momentary switch. So when the momentary switch is down, you're translating. When the momentary switch is up, you're rotating. But again, the point of the contest, I think, is to find people who go, oh, I know I'm inspired by that problem and know how to solve it. Okay, let's see. If you want more details about the contest, the website is, let me bring up the website here. It is terryslynchpins.com. There is information there about the contest. People in the chat are asking for technical details about the contest. To be honest with you, the contest rules are very sort of open. They're the minimal. The requirements that Terry has defined is he wants it to look like a Lynchpin. That is not just an aesthetic choice, but there are also future plans for how the Lynchpin might join together. So people who are saying, oh, this has already been done with a cube, well, it's a different solution when you put it in the Lynchpin shape. And that the motors have to sort of be in the plane of the Lynchpin. Yeah. It has to be able to, has a certain size requirement and prop size. And it has to be able to...
That really, it doesn't, I mean, for the competition right now, as long as as long as the individual struts, let me do this. As long as this is a larger linchpin, but as long as the engines are within the pentagonal planes, resting strictly inside the pentagonal planes, that's all that we really need to accomplish. And you can build it as large as you can make it or as small as you can make it. We were trying to keep things uniform to what's available and what's really easily accessible to the community out there.
Yeah. So I'm really intrigued and curious to see at the end of the contest what people come up with, and to find out. I mean, if somebody pulls it off and wins the prize, if it turns out, just see how it turns out. I think this is a really interesting problem to solve, and that's what personally drew me to it, was the challenge of building. You say, well, 6 degrees of freedom. Okay, that's interesting, but that's been done. But then you take and you angle the motors a certain way, and now it suddenly gets way more complicated. And the fact that there's some people out there who say it's not that hard, and go, okay, well, how hard is it? I think it's really interesting.
Well, let me give one last example. The way Chad, when I initially thought of it basically flying this way, and being supported by 3 motors or engines up here, and then these would end up being as rudder, so to speak. But then Chad brought my attention to it behaving as a quad, and all 4 of you pulling up. And so there's a number of directions that this will be able to go in, but you can see off the flight simulator, it creates a stable environment, almost like that bubble at the bottom of the ocean, that stable environment. So you really shouldn't have much problem, mimicking what took place with the pill, that was able to really cancel out all of the prevailing forces against its plane or flying machine.
Yeah, like the pill idea, Terrence, like you mentioned, is kind of how I see it working too. And it would fly like the cube sort of thing, where it would stay in stationary space. And Drew, you do some cinematography work, right? Some great cinematography. So you would have the camera in it, and you could actually fly around the center of that camera in any orientation, right? It would actually just sit in space and rotate, right? So if I wanted to do a film shot like down, and I can go up, and I can look at this way, so it becomes an eyeball in space. You can point any way you want, right? For film, filmography, etc. Right? Picking fruit, harvesting, pollinating plants. Eventually you could do anything, right? Put up fires.
Here's 5 of them coming together. When I talk about the ability to modulate, now here's 15 of them coming together. Here's another arrangement of 5 coming together. But here's the 4. And the 4, it keeps taking this tetrahedral shape to where now you have the 16. And those have their own chirality. You tell me what other drones can modulate and continue building substructures and substructures that all can continue building. That's what we're looking for. Somebody that can see that vision of a much larger system behaving in all applicable fields.
Right. Then when they combine, their load capacity can change too, right? They can carry different loads, right? Do different things. Yeah.
In comparison to one.
Right.
It's a closed, it's game over,
Terry, the chat wants to know, where are you getting these models? You have all these models of the Lynchpin. Where are they coming from?
That's another thing that Chad, who set this whole thing up, Chad actually sent me the individual pentagonal pieces, so that I could build all of these things up. And it's something that we're going to put together to sell with Rotor Riot. We're actually modeling out some of the pieces now, because everybody, the moment you start building with it, like me and James may never speak again for some odd reason, or same with DJ or Chris, but each and every person that's come involved with the Lynchpin, it takes over their entire way of thinking and seeing, because you see possibility, whereas before you saw an obstacle, and it answers all questions. It's just It's sacred geometry at its very best. It teaches. So I want
Okay.
everybody to learn about it.
All right. Well, the website is linked in the video description. I hope I put it. I think I put it down there. And anybody who is interested is welcome to enter. And anybody who wants to follow along, I'm sure there's going to be updates posted there. But that is going to bring us to the end of the stream. Thank you, Terry, for you know what, Terry? Thank you for your interest in FPV. When I first met you at the remote ID protest in Washington, someone said Terrence Howard's coming. I was like, Terrence Howard is interested in FPV. And I know that you don't like to make a big deal out of the fact that you have a name and your voice has weight. I know you want to be humble, but it does. And if you support FPV and you are interested in helping to fight for it, I think that everybody in FPV should be excited about that. Whether that's because you want to fly freestyle or race or build a Lynchpin. So thank you for that.
All of those things, and I gotta say thank you because, you know, as an actor, I feel like I'm an emotional prostitute. I feel like I belong to whoever the John is or producer is, you know. But the people within this community, you guys are the misfits, as I see it, the same way I'm a misfit, and somehow our instinct and our quarks can come together and make a real beautiful person, you know, as part of the human race. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to be seen as somebody that pretends to be somebody. I want you guys to get to know who I am. And what I am is just some extension of the Lynchpin, because that's all that really permeates
Awesome.
my.
All right, guys. That is going to do it for this stream. Monday, we are back to the usual Q&A. I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting questions about this. I have to say, this has been, when I started doing FPV and started doing YouTube, I never thought that one day I would get an opportunity like this. I'm very thankful and honored to have been given the opportunity. And that's going to do it. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you guys for coming out.
Thanks, Joshua.
Everybody, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
And we are